That day will never leave my mind. My cruel mother-in-law accused my daughter of stealing, her rage boiling over before I could even speak. She grabbed my child by the hair, yanking so hard that she screamed in pain before throwing her to the ground like she was nothing. Then, with terrifying fury, she picked up a baseball bat and struck her with full force, the sound of impact echoing in my ears. My husband and I watched in horror as our world shattered in an instant. My name is Lena Foster, and I am 34 years old. I live a peaceful and fulfilling life with my husband, Caleb Foster, and our 12-year-old daughter, Lily Foster. We have built a home filled with love, warmth, and laughter. Lily is the light of our lives. Curious, intelligent, and full of imagination, she never fails to bring joy into our home. She has a habit of exploring everything around her, finding excitement in the smallest discoveries. Whether she's collecting shiny pebbles from the backyard or inventing stories about magical kingdoms, her creativity knows no limits. Caleb and I have always encouraged Lily's inquisitive nature, believing that a child should grow up feeling safe, loved, and free to explore the world. We have worked hard to ensure that she has a happy childhood, free from fear or pain. However, not everything in our family has been perfect. One major challenge in my life has always been my relationship with Diana Foster, my mother-in-law. Diana is a cold, strict, and controlling woman. Even before I married Caleb, he warned me that his mother was not easy to deal with. Over the years, I tried my best to build a civil relationship with her, mostly for Caleb's sake. But despite her harsh nature, I never considered Diana to be a threat. I thought of her as a tough, emotionally distant woman, someone difficult but not dangerous. I was wrong. The events that unfolded one afternoon changed everything. That day, I saw a side of Diana that I never thought existed, and it shattered the fragile peace between us forever. It was a bright, sunny afternoon when Caleb and I decided to visit his mother, Diana Foster. She had been living alone since Caleb's father passed away, and though she never openly admitted it, I knew that deep down, she enjoyed our visits, especially the time she spent with Lily. Despite Diana's strict and often unapproachable demeanor, she had a soft spot for her granddaughter. Or at least, that's what I had believed. Lily was particularly excited about this visit. That morning, while playing outside, she had discovered something she couldn't wait to show her grandmother, a beautifully preserved butterfly with vibrant blue and orange wings. In her innocent excitement, she held it gently in a small glass jar, eager to share her discovery. As we drove toward Diana's house, she sat in the back seat, practically bouncing with anticipation. "Mom, do you think Grandma has ever seen a butterfly like this?" she asked, holding up the jar for me to see. I smiled at her enthusiasm and replied, "I'm sure she has, sweetheart, but she'll love hearing all about it from you." Beside me, Caleb glanced at me through the rearview mirror and gave me a knowing smile, a quiet, unspoken moment of shared understanding between us. When we arrived at Diana's house, everything seemed normal. The house was quiet, the air carried a faint scent of cinnamon, and soft classical music played in the background. Diana greeted us at the door with her usual firm tone, her expression unreadable as always. However, when her eyes landed on Lily, there was a brief flicker of affection, barely noticeable but present. "Come in," she said, stepping aside to let us enter. "It's good to see you all." Her voice carried its usual stiffness, but I could sense that, in her own way, she was genuinely pleased to see Lily. As we walked in, Lily rushed to the living room, eager to find a place to set down her butterfly jar before showing it to Diana. Meanwhile, Caleb and I busied ourselves helping Diana with a few chores around the house. Everything about that afternoon felt calm and uneventful, a routine visit like any other. I had no idea that this seemingly normal day was about to take a devastating turn, one that would forever change our family. As the afternoon went on, everything remained peaceful. Caleb and I stayed busy, helping Diana with small household tasks while Lily kept herself entertained in the living room. She had set her butterfly jar on a small side table and had now moved on to looking through an old wooden cabinet filled with books and trinkets. Lily had always been curious and adventurous, and even something as simple as exploring an unfamiliar cabinet was exciting for her. While sweeping the kitchen floor, I could hear her soft giggles and occasional whispers to herself as she examined the items inside the cabinet. It was a sound I had grown used to, a comforting reminder of her innocence and excitement for the world around her. I smiled, thinking about how she always managed to find joy in the simplest things. Then, in the midst of the quiet atmosphere, I heard Lily's voice from the other room. "Mom, look what I found," she called out excitedly. Curious, I stepped out of the kitchen and into the living room. Lily stood by the cabinet, holding up a neatly folded bill in her hands, a $50 note. Her face was lit up with curiosity as she examined it like a newfound treasure. "I think it was inside this book," she said, pointing to an old hardcover resting on the edge of the cabinet. "Maybe Grandma forgot it here?" I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could say a word, a sharp, angry voice shattered the peace of the room. "What do you think you're doing?" Diana's furious voice cut through the air like a knife, making my heart race. Caleb, who had been outside taking out the trash, quickly stepped into the doorway, his face filled with concern. Lily froze, her eyes widening in shock. Diana stormed into the living room, her face twisted in rage as she snatched the money from Lily's hands. "You are stealing from me?" Diana's voice trembled with fury. "Is this how you've been raised? To be a thief?" Lily's lips quivered, her small hands shaking. "No, Grandma, I wasn't stealing. I just found it in the book. I was going to give it back." But Diana wasn't listening. Her anger had blinded her to reason, and as I looked into her cold, hard eyes, a sick feeling settled in my stomach. Something was very, very wrong. The room fell deathly silent for a moment. Lily stood frozen, her small hands trembling, her wide eyes glistening with unshed tears. Caleb and I were too stunned to react immediately, struggling to process Diana's uncontrollable rage. Then, before I could step in, Diana lunged forward and grabbed Lily by her hair. A sharp, painful scream escaped Lily's lips as Diana yanked her backward with force. Her small body jerked violently, and she stumbled, her hands flying up to her head as she desperately tried to pry away her grandmother's iron grip. "Diana, stop it," I shouted, my voice laced with panic as I rushed forward. "You lying little thief." Diana's voice was filled with venom. Her face twisted with fury, her breath coming in ragged bursts as she tightened her grip on Lily's hair and pulled even harder. Tears streamed down Lily's face. "Grandma, please. I wasn't stealing. I promise," she sobbed, her voice breaking. Caleb moved quickly, stepping between them. He grabbed Diana's arm, forcefully pulling her away from our daughter. "Let her go, Mom. What the hell are you doing?" For a brief moment, Diana hesitated, her chest rising and falling with deep, furious breaths. But then, her eyes landed on the baseball bat leaning against the corner of the room, one that Caleb had left there months ago after a family game in the backyard. Before any of us could react, Diana reached for the bat. "No!" I screamed, lunging forward. But it was too late. With terrifying force, Diana swung the bat and struck Lily's head. The sickening thud of metal against bone echoed through the room, and Lily collapsed instantly. The world seemed to slow down. I saw her tiny body hit the floor, her arms limp, her chest rising and falling in short, shallow breaths. Blood trickled from her forehead, staining her soft blonde hair. Her eyes fluttered weakly, dazed and unfocused, as if struggling to understand what had just happened. "Lily!" I dropped to my knees beside her, hands trembling as I cradled her head in my lap. My vision blurred with tears, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. Caleb's face was a mask of shock and horror. His hands clenched into fists as he turned to Diana, his voice filled with rage. "What the hell have you done?" "She's just a child." Diana stood there, breathing heavily, her hands gripping the bat tightly. For a moment, there was no remorse in her eyes, just cold, unrelenting anger. I pressed my shaking fingers to Lily's neck. Her pulse was faint, but still there. "We need to get her to the hospital now." I choked out, barely able to form the words through my panic. Caleb didn't hesitate. He scooped Lily into his arms, holding her limp body against his chest. Without another word, we ran to the car, leaving Diana standing in the middle of the living room. As we sped away, tires screeching against the pavement, I turned to look at my daughter. Her face was too pale. Her breathing was too slow. I could barely hear my own voice as I whispered, "Hold on, sweetheart. Just hold on." Caleb drove like a madman, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. The car tore through the streets, moving as fast as possible toward the hospital. I sat in the back seat, holding Lily in my arms, pressing a shaking hand to the wound on her head, desperately trying to stop the bleeding. "Lily, baby, stay with me. Just keep your eyes open," I whispered, my voice cracking. Her body was limp, her breathing shallow. Every few seconds, her eyelids fluttered, and she let out a soft, weak moan. She was fading. "Caleb, hurry!" I cried, panic overwhelming me. "I'm going as fast as I can." Caleb's voice was filled with pure terror. He ran a red light, earning the blare of horns behind us, but he didn't care. I looked down at Lily's small, pale face, my hands trembling as I stroked her blood-matted hair. I had never felt fear like this before. My heart was pounding, my breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. "This isn't happening," I whispered to myself. "This can't be happening." By the time we screeched to a stop outside the emergency room, Caleb jumped out and rushed to the back seat, yanking the door open. He gently but quickly lifted Lily into his arms, her small, fragile body barely moving. "Help! Someone help us," he shouted as we ran inside. Doctors and nurses reacted immediately. A team rushed toward us, taking Lily from Caleb's arms and laying her onto a stretcher. She was hit in the head. "She's been unconscious. She's barely breathing," I sobbed, gripping the arm of a nurse. "We need a trauma room now," a doctor shouted, pushing the stretcher down the hallway. I tried to follow, but a nurse held me back. "Please, we need space to work," she said gently, though her eyes were filled with urgency. I watched helplessly as they wheeled my daughter away, disappearing behind a set of double doors. And just like that, she was gone from my sight. A choked sob escaped my lips, and my knees nearly gave out. Caleb caught me, wrapping his arms around me as I broke down in his chest. His own body was trembling. "We should have never gone there," he muttered, his voice hollow. "I should have never let her near my mother." Tears burned my eyes as I whispered, "She needs to be arrested. Diana needs to pay for this." Caleb nodded slowly, his face dark with rage and devastation. "Then let's make the call." The waiting room was cold and silent, except for the sound of my shallow breathing. My arms felt empty without Lily in them. The smell of disinfectant and sterilized equipment burned my nose, making my stomach churn. Time felt frozen. Caleb and I sat side by side, but neither of us spoke. We just stared at the closed emergency room doors, waiting for any news. Every passing second felt like a lifetime. I gripped Caleb's hand so tightly my knuckles turned white, but he didn't complain. He just held onto me like he was afraid I'd collapse if he let go. Maybe I would. Finally, after what felt like hours, a doctor stepped into the waiting room. He looked serious but calm, and I clung to that as I forced myself to stand. "Mr. and Mrs. Foster?" His voice was steady, professional. "Yes," I croaked. "How is she? Is Lily okay?" The doctor gave us a small, reassuring nod. "She's stable now. The blow to her head caused a concussion and a deep laceration, but there is no skull fracture. We've stopped the bleeding and stitched the wound. However, she's experiencing mild swelling in the brain, so we need to keep her under observation for at least 24 hours. She's awake, but she's very weak and disoriented." Relief flooded through me, but it wasn't enough to erase the anger burning in my chest. I closed my eyes and let out a shaky breath. "Can we see her?" Caleb asked, his voice tight with emotion. The doctor nodded. "Of course, but please keep it brief. She needs rest." Caleb and I rushed down the hallway toward Lily's room. When we entered, my heart broke all over again. Lily lay on the hospital bed, small and fragile, her head wrapped in white bandages. Her face was pale, her eyelids heavy. N4 was attached to her arm, and the steady beep of the heart monitor filled the quiet room. I hurried to her side, gently stroking her hair away from her face. "Lily's sweetheart," I whispered. She slowly turned her head toward me, her lips parting slightly. "Mom." Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "I'm here, baby," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're safe now." Caleb sat on the other side of the bed, gripping her small hand in his. "We love you so much, Lily. You're so strong." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes. "I didn't steal," she whispered weakly. "Grandma, she was so mad." A wave of rage surged through me. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. "I know, sweetheart," I said softly. "I know. And she's not going to hurt you ever again." Caleb met my eyes, and in that moment, we both knew we couldn't let this go unpunished. I stood up, my hands shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm calling the police." I stepped out of Lily's hospital room, my entire body trembling with a mix of rage and determination. Caleb followed closely behind me, his jaw clenched, his eyes dark with fury. Neither of us spoke as we made our way to the front desk, where a nurse directed us to the hospital's security office. Inside, a police officer in uniform was already waiting, having been notified by the hospital about a possible domestic violence case. He was a tall man with sharp eyes, his notepad already in hand as he looked up at us. "You're the parents of Lily Foster?" he asked, his voice steady but serious. "Yes," I said, my throat dry. "We want to file a report." "All right," the officer said, flipping open his notebook. "Tell me exactly what happened." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to relive the nightmare. "We were visiting my husband's mother, Diana Foster. My daughter, Lily, found a $50 bill inside a book in the living room. She wasn't stealing it. She was just curious. But when Diana saw her holding the money, my voice wavered, but I pushed forward. She lost control. She grabbed Lily by the hair, yanked her hard, and screamed at her. When Lily tried to explain Diana, she picked up a baseball bat and hit her on the head." The officer's pen stopped mid-sentence. He lifted his head sharply. "She struck your daughter with a baseball bat?" "Yes," Caleb said, his voice dark with barely restrained fury. "Lily collapsed. She was bleeding. We rushed her here immediately." The officer let out a slow breath and nodded. "That's a serious assault. Do you have any previous concerns about your mother, Mr. Foster?" Caleb shook his head, his fists clenching at his sides. "She's always been strict, but we never thought she was capable of something like this. If I had known, I never would have taken Lily there." The officer continued taking notes, then glanced toward the hallway. "Can I see Lily?" I hesitated for a second, then nodded. "She's weak, but she's awake." He followed us to Lily's room, where she lay, still pale but watching us with tired eyes. The sight of her hooked up to IVs, her head wrapped in bandages, made my anger surge even higher. The officer knelt beside her bed and spoke gently. "Hey, Lily. I'm Officer Grant. I'm here to make sure you're safe." Lily's lips trembled slightly. "Grandma was mad," she whispered. "She called me a thief. But I didn't take anything." "I know, sweetheart," I murmured, brushing my fingers through her hair. The officer nodded and stood. "That's enough for now. I don't want to stress her further." He turned to us, his expression serious. "With this statement, along with the medical report from the doctors, we have enough evidence to arrest Diana Foster immediately." Caleb let out a slow breath. "What happens now?" The officer straightened. "Now we find her, and we bring her in." As soon as Officer Grant left the hospital, he radioed his team, issuing an immediate arrest warrant for Diana Foster on charges of aggravated assault and child abuse. Caleb and I remained in the hospital room with Lily, but I couldn't stop thinking about what was about to happen. Diana had no idea what was coming for her. Roughly an hour later, Officer Grant called Caleb's phone. Caleb put the call on speaker, and we listened intently. "We've located Diana Foster at her residence," the officer said. "We're about to take her into custody." My heart pounded. "Are you sure she's there?" "She answered the door when we knocked," Grant confirmed. She seemed unbothered, almost as if she didn't think she did anything wrong. Of course, she didn't. Diana was the type of woman who always believed she was right, no matter the situation. "Do you want to stay on the line while we proceed?" Grant asked. "Yes," Caleb answered firmly. Through the speaker, we heard muffled voices and shuffling sounds. Then a firm knock. "Diana Foster, this is the police. We have a warrant for your arrest. Open the door." A few seconds of silence passed before Diana's familiar, sharp voice cut through. "What the hell is this about?" "Ma'am, you are under arrest for the aggravated assault of a minor, your granddaughter, Lily Foster. Step outside and put your hands where we can see them." Diana scoffed. "You can't be serious. That brat needed discipline, not coddling." Hearing those words made my stomach churn with disgust. "We're not going to ask again, ma'am." Officer Grant's voice remained firm. "Step outside now." More shuffling. A few moments later, we heard the distinct sound of handcuffs clicking into place. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law," one of the officers began. Diana's voice was filled with rage and disbelief. "You're arresting me for doing what a parent should have done? That girl needed to learn a lesson." Caleb's jaw tightened. I could see the fire in his eyes as he stared at the phone. "She's not your child," I muttered under my breath, unable to hold back my anger. "And she didn't deserve to be beaten over a stupid $50 bill." The call ended abruptly, but I could picture the scene in my head. Diana, standing in the doorway, handcuffed, still believing she had done nothing wrong. I turned to Caleb, exhaling deeply. "She's finally facing consequences." He nodded slowly, his shoulders tense. "But it's not over yet. We still have to make sure she doesn't walk free." We both knew the real fight was just beginning. A few weeks passed, and the day of the trial finally arrived. Diana Foster was formally charged with aggravated assault on a minor and child endangerment. The case had gained local attention, and the courtroom was packed with reporters, concerned citizens, and even some extended family members who had come to see the outcome. I sat in the front row with Caleb beside me, holding my hand tightly. My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced over at Lily, who sat quietly next to me. Her head injury had healed significantly, but the emotional wounds were still fresh. She had been having nightmares ever since the attack, and even though she never said it out loud, I knew she was terrified of what would happen today. Then, they brought Diana into the courtroom. She walked in wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hands cuffed in front of her. For the first time in my life, she didn't look powerful. She looked small, weak, and bitter. But even then, her cold eyes never wavered as she scanned the room, finally landing on Caleb and me. Instead of remorse, her lips curled into a faint sneer. She still didn't believe she had done anything wrong. The judge entered the courtroom, and the trial began. The prosecutor stood and laid out the case. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what we have before us is a case of unforgivable cruelty. A grandmother, someone meant to love and protect, instead inflicted violence upon her own granddaughter. She grabbed her by the hair, humiliated her, and in an uncontrollable fit of rage, struck her with a baseball bat. If not for the swift actions of her parents, this child may not have survived. Today, we are here to ensure that Diana Foster is held accountable for her actions." Diana's defense attorney tried to argue that she was simply disciplining Lily, that she never intended to cause real harm. But then, the prosecution played the 911 call Caleb had made that night. The room fell into a heavy silence as my panicked voice filled the courtroom. "She's bleeding. She's not waking up. Please, we need help." Tears welled in my eyes as the room heard Lily's soft whimpers in the background of the recording. Then came the hospital report. The doctor who treated Lily took the stand, confirming the severity of her injuries. "This was not an accident," the doctor said firmly. "The force of the impact could have caused permanent brain damage. The fact that she survived is purely luck." The courtroom murmured in shock. Then Lily herself was called to testify. I squeezed her hand as she stood, her small frame looking even smaller under the weight of all the eyes watching her. She walked to the witness stand and sat down, her legs barely reaching the floor. The judge spoke kindly to her, explaining that she didn't have to be afraid. The prosecutor approached gently. "Lily, can you tell us what happened that day?" Lily's lip trembled, but she took a deep breath. I found money in a book at Grandma's house," she whispered. "I was going to put it back. But when she saw me, she got really mad. She pulled my hair really hard." A few jurors exchanged horrified glances. "And then what happened?" the prosecutor asked. Lily blinked, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "She hit me with a baseball bat. And then I woke up in the hospital." A wave of whispers rippled through the courtroom. Some jurors looked physically sick. Diana sat there, expressionless. She didn't even look at Lily. "Thank you, Lily," the prosecutor said softly. "You did great." Lily returned to me, and I wrapped my arms around her tightly, whispering how proud I was of her. After more evidence was presented, including the police report and the medical records, the prosecution rested its case. Now it was Diana's turn to speak. She stood, her voice flat, emotionless. "I did what any real parent should do. Kids today have no discipline. If my son and his wife weren't so weak, I wouldn't have had to teach that girl a lesson." Gasps filled the courtroom. Even the judge looked disgusted. With that single statement, she sealed her fate. The jury didn't take long to deliberate. Within an hour, they returned. The foreman stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Diana Foster, guilty of aggravated assault and child abuse." I let out a shaky breath, tears streaming down my face. Caleb closed his eyes, his shoulders sagging in relief. The judge nodded. "Diana Foster, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years in prison with no possibility of parole for the first 10 years. It was over. Diana's face finally changed. Her confidence shattered. The reality of her fate sank in as the bailiff approached. As the handcuffs were secured around her wrists, she finally looked at Caleb. "You did this to me," she spat. "Your own mother." Caleb's expression didn't waver. "No, Mom. You did this to yourself." As Diana was escorted away, I let out a slow, deep breath, pulling Lily into my arms. The nightmare was finally over. The trial was over, but the emotional weight of everything that had happened still lingered. Even though justice had been served, I knew that the scars Diana had left, both physical and emotional, would take time to heal. After leaving the courthouse, Caleb, Lily, and I returned home. The house felt different now, quieter, heavier. The trauma of that night still clung to the walls like a shadow, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like we could finally start to breathe again. That night, I sat beside Lily's bed, brushing her hair back as she clutched her stuffed bear. She hadn't let go of it since the hospital. "Mom," she whispered, looking up at me. "Yes, baby," I replied softly. "Grandma's gone now, right?" Her voice was small, hesitant. I nodded, my heart aching. "Yes, sweetheart. She can't hurt you anymore." She exhaled slowly, closing her eyes. "Good," she whispered, and for the first time in weeks, she fell asleep peacefully. Over the next few months, we focused on helping Lily heal. We took her to a child therapist who helped her process her emotions, overcome her nightmares, and rebuild her sense of security. The first few sessions were hard. She was quiet, withdrawn, afraid to talk about what had happened. But little by little, she opened up. Caleb and I also sought counseling, dealing with our own guilt and anger. We had let Diana into Lily's life, and we had almost lost her because of it. But therapy helped us understand that we did the right thing. We protected our daughter when she needed us the most. We focused on making our home a safe, happy place again. We redecorated Lily's room, letting her pick out bright colors and cheerful artwork. We started new family traditions, Friday movie nights, weekend picnics, spontaneous ice cream runs. Little by little, Lily's laughter returned. Her curiosity and excitement for life slowly started shining through again. One afternoon, I watched her running through the backyard, chasing butterflies with a friend. Her giggles filled the air, light and carefree. Caleb stood beside me, watching with a smile. For the first time in a long time, we both felt at peace. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "We did the right thing," I whispered. He nodded, his eyes soft with love. "We always will." And in that moment I knew our family was whole again. No matter what happened, no matter what we faced in the future, we would always stand together. Because love, protection, and family were stronger than fear. Thank you for watching this story. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in this situation? Stay tuned for more powerful stories. See you in the next video.